Today we are looking at 10 players who are skyrocketing up the board in drafts, who are hot off the waivers, and they could help you win your fantasy league. We're going to strategize over them today, but before we do, you have to click that subscribe button right now. Click it with the mouse, tap it with the finger on your phone. Stop missing out on these players because we're helping you build your team, helping you find guys off waivers, helping you win your league. But let's dig in. Let's look at our 10 guys for today. And our first guy is Nick Chubb. I feel like I haven't talked about him in a bit, so we're going to talk about him today. Top tier running back. One of the top running backs in fantasy football right now. Not being slept on at all, but in a prime situation to have his best year, or at least stay consistent to what we've seen. And that's pretty damn good number. 16.5 points per game over the last 4 seasons since 2020. So very consistent, very productive, and you're getting top end weeks. And I think this offense is going to click even more this year. Deshaun Watson has another year in the system, a full training camp with the team, and this team looks like it's clicking. Kareem Hunt is gone. They have not brought in any other running backs of consequence. Really, it's really going to be the Nick Chubb show in the backfield. Might see a little bit more targets, but they may just lean on Elijah Moore and the receivers for that department. But they're going to move the chains. They're going to be a little bit faster in pace. They're going to be a little bit more impactful. Nick Chubb's going to be a huge benefit of that. And if you're looking for a top running back, you don't know who to get or who you like, maybe look at Nick Chubb. But let me know which top running back you're trying to get in your draft. Here we go. Our second player, Quentin Johnson, wide receiver, 41 in ADP per underdog fantasy. And you may like him, you may not like him, you might be scratching your head on him. The thing about this, it's all about price. And we're at the part of the draft where he's being selected, where the well is running dry at wide receiver, and pretty much all the wide receivers here have their question marks. So it's not like if he goes boom, if he goes bust. It's really the price here is what we're looking at, and we're really at a good price tag here since the well is running dry at wide receiver, and we're looking in a phone booth at wide receiver. We're looking at a guy who has a ton of upside. The depth chart's not going to start off super juicy there. He's going to have some competition with Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and company there, so it may start off slow. That being said, if you cannot be patient with a rookie wide receiver and drafting him here at this price tag, because it is kind of pricey considering you may have to wait a bit for him to start seeing a considerable amount of snaps and targets, then you may want to go with another option. So I'm also going to tell you and strategize with you on whether or not you should be going with some of these players. But if you want the upside here in the middle rounds at wide receiver, maybe you're a little bit light at wide receiver, and you know what, if I hit on the back end on this player or that player, I could go nuclear, and I want to go to the moon, I want to chase going to the moon, then you may want Quentin Johnson. 15.6 average depth of target at TCU. Justin Herbert's at quarterback, slings the rock. He's drafted to really be the replacement for Mike Williams, but he could give you a little bit more. Honestly, these wide receivers have not been healthy these last few years. We could see him pop up here soon. That's the thing about him. He does have some talent. He's been making plays in training camp and in mini camp. So he's a guy you want to pay attention to, but it might start off slow. So you may want to pivot to something else. Usually in this part of the draft, though, if it's me drafting and it's my typical teams, I'm usually drafting running back in this position. So I may not have too many shares of Quentin Johnson, but I'm also going to have teams where I'm shooting for the upside. So think about that. We're looking at a first-round pick who's talented, who's going to get deep targets when he's able to get his opportunity. So that's something you want to pay attention to. Next is Tank Bigsby, RB40 and ADP, and he's at the spot of the draft. Double-digit rounds here, where the well's running dry on a lot of positions, almost everything. Here's where you want to shoot for upside. Here's where you want to shoot for those young rookie running backs, those second-year players, those guys who are very ambiguous, and you want to see if they hit, see if they go nuclear, see what happens. Just take those dart throws. He's a dart thrower you may want to look at because he's tied to Trevor Lawrence. He's tied to the Jaguars offense. You want that. He can be pounded between the tackles. He's a third-round pick. They drafted him on day 2 of the draft for a reason, because they think he's talented. And it was a stacked running back class. And since it was a stacked running back class and the running back position is devalued, most of the running backs fell in the draft. Tank Bigsby did not. They already had a running back. They already had a running back they drafted in the first round a couple years ago. And Travis Etienne. I like both running backs. I think they're both good. You can draft both. You can draft Travis Etienne. We've had commenters say, hey, I faded Travis Etienne. I'm just going with Tank Bigsby, and I'm loading up with other positions. So it's really how you want to play the game here, how you want to strategize. But the thing is, if something happens to Travis Etienne, or not, or is just getting a considerable amount of snaps, you might catch a guy here who gets a run somewhere throughout the season, or you might see some spike weeks because he is on the Jaguars. He's going to get some opportunity, probably starting off. It's not going to be a huge load, but it might ramp up, and things might happen to where they may need him. He's a very dependable running back, high-end recruit coming out of high school, was productive at the SEC level, behind a malnourished Auburn offensive line. He can do some things. He's not over the moon crazy good, but he's a guy that can get it done for you if things happen to go his way. Next, Dalton Kincaid, tight end 11 in ADP, and this is a fun one because we got a first-round tight end in a very explosive offense, and we usually don't want to invest in rookie tight ends or even second-year tight ends, but he's got draft capital. He's on the Bills' offense. When he's running with the first team, he is running nothing but routes. They don't keep him in the pass block, so there's going to be opportunity. He could be their big slot guy, and that could allow him to be fantasy relevant. And the thing is, where you're drafting him at, borderline tight end 2, there's not much difference between that and the tight end 25 from a points per game standpoint from a week-to-week basis. And there's not much difference between a points per game standpoint between the tight end 25 and like the tight end 8 range on a week-to-week standpoint. And then there's some weeks where like the tight end 8 through 10 or somewhere in that range doesn't even hit double-digit fantasy points. And if you want to shoot for upside at this position, you don't want to pay too much, but you also don't want to wait too long either. Dalton Kincaid could be your guy, and if it doesn't work out, then you can stream because everybody else is going to be streaming along with you. So what's the big deal? Only 3 other people in your league is not going to be doing it, and there might be a couple others who are just holding on to their mid tight ends. But all in all, the tight end position's wonky, so really strategize with that in your draft. Know how far you want to fade, set those markers, or just pay up for your tight end and get your Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, or whoever else you want. Speaking of that, George Pickens, wide receiver 32 in ADP. And really, he should be valued a little bit higher because he's been looking good. And he's a very, very talented wide receiver going into his second year. Second-year wide receivers tend to start hitting the ground running, especially if they flashed as a rookie, which he did. He plays well with Kenny Pickett, had 11.36 points per game with Pickett under center, so he was even more productive with him. Kenny Pickett likes to sling it downfield. He likes to sling it deep. He's also going into his second season. We're watching this team in preseason, and they are looking pretty good on offense. They're firing on all cylinders, but since we got Kenny Pickett there running around with the 2 white gloves, we're catching some of these wide receivers at a discount, and the fact that they're going a little bit cheaper means that you might want to look to buy in your drafts. Next, Juwan Johnson, tight end 17 in ADP. So if you want to go really cheap at tight end and really stream, play the matchups, Juwan Johnson is a guy you may want to look at. 9.4 average depth of target. Derek Carr's there. He likes to sling it to the tight end. He liked to target Darren Waller before. We have Juwan Johnson here who can get downfield, catch balls, make things happen. 609 air yards last year, 9th among tight ends last year. He's cheap upside. He's cheap upside, and he's so cheap there's no gamble. Doesn't work out. You're not liking the matchup for the week. You can really turn and burn, stream with another tight end, pick another tight end up, play the matchups, and see what happens. If you want to draft a second tight end, you may want to make sure that second tight end's pretty cheap. And if you need a second tight end that's cheap, here's a guy who's in a situation where he could be seeing some opportunity and could be having some matchups where he gives you some upside gains. Next, Darren Waller. We talked about him with Derek Carr, and now he's with Danny Dimes. And if you want to pay up for tight end, but you want to go a shade cheaper so you can get your wide receiver, your running back, and maybe somebody else, depending on where he's going in your draft, you may want to look at him because he's getting targeted heavily in preseason right now. He got a 13.6 average depth of target when he was on the field last year. The thing about that is that's tremendous for a tight end. And we know he's highly athletic. And Danny Dimes may look to him to be his wide receiver 1, his top option in the passing game. He might be soaking up targets. Tight end 4, price tag here, so it is kind of expensive. But if you want a top tight end who's just a little cheaper so you can fit in your running backs and wide receivers at the top end, you might want to look at Darren Waller. But if you want a cheap rookie tight end that I like is Jordan Addison, wide receiver 36 in ADP. Sharing the field with Justin Jefferson is scaring some people off. But I love the volume in this offense. Vikes are 7th in pace of play. Dalvin Cook is gone. Who knows what this run game's going to look like, but I imagine they're going to move the chains no matter what, whether they're running it or throwing it. And Kirk Cousins averages 40 pass attempts per game. Not all those attempts go to Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison got Kenny Pickett drafted in the first round. Jordan Addison's going to help Kirk Cousins. He's going to help Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson's going to help Jordan Addison. This is a good match. This is the perfect spot for Jordan Addison as a rookie because he's a very nuanced route runner. He's quick. He plays bigger than his size. He doesn't have to be the alpha. He's going to run against softer coverages because you know you're going to have to scheme against Justin Jefferson, and you got Hawkinson there at tight end. This is going to be awesome for him. He's going to have some spike weeks. He might give you some consistent weeks, but look for him to ramp up in the season. Look for him to start off good too because he's a very consistent wide receiver. Broke out with 2 different collegiate programs, showed he can be productive, showed he can transition from the high school level to the college level, and then from the one college program to another college program, and he's shown that he can look good in minicamp, training camp, and preseason. Why not like Jordan Addison? Why not invest in a fast-paced offense that likes to throw the football? It kind of makes sense. They didn't draft him in the first round to sit him and watch him sit on the sideline. Next, Treyland Burks, wide receiver 40 in ADP. The thing is about him, in your home leagues, he's probably floating on waivers or he's going a lot cheaper than that. Maybe wide receiver 50, 55. He's been hurt. He's started practicing, though. He's starting to work out. And this might be a good upside play for the dollar spent because he's free right now. And the thing is, he's a first-round wide receiver with good size, adjusted athleticism. However, the downside here, DeAndre Hopkins is there. Expect him to be somewhere around a 25 to 35% target share. And that's not a good thing considering the Titans were 4th worst in pace of play last year. So typically on slower paced teams, you do not want the wide receiver 2. However, on this, you're drafting a talented wide receiver at a very cheap price point, one of your last picks or so, and you're closing your eyes and hoping the talent wins out eventually. And if not, you turn and burn on the waiver wire. Another thing is, on those last picks, you do not want to draft stability. You want to draft some upside. You want a little bit of a drag in your portfolio. So you don't have that sunk cost. You don't have that clogger there who's giving you just enough fantasy points to really be in your brain, preventing you from turning and burning and trying to get the next best guy off the waiver wire. That guy that could be better than that roster clogger who just stepped in or had a good situation granted to him due to injury, attrition, or whatever happened. So Treyland Burks could be a gift in 2 different ways. If he doesn't hit, that's going to allow you to be more flexible with the waiver wire. If he does hit, then you got a first-round wide receiver, highly athletic here at a very cheap price tag. That's what we're looking at here. Your last picks, upside, upside, upside. That's the strategy we're looking at. So really, if you don't like him, just think upside with the next player. And Chris Olave is my main breakout candidate. And I'm talking breakout candidate as in going to the moon, going nuclear, because he already broke out as a rookie and looked good. Wide receiver 10 in efficiency last year. We had some wide receiver 1 weeks, consistent production, had some injuries. If not for that, probably would have been even more productive. Look for him to get air yards. Look for him to be consistently targeted. Look for him to fuel your fantasy team. And if you need a wide receiver at his price, you're getting a good one here that should really give you a good return on investment, considering you're getting borderline wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 price tag, and you could get a little bit more than that, especially with Derek Carr under center and with them pushing the ball downfield. And then that will allow you to start early with a running back, or maybe go double up at wide receiver, however you want to work the draft board or whatever comes to you. But this really gives you some options. But those are 10 skyrocketing players that can really help you in fantasy football. Some of these players are at value and you need to strategize around them, or we're talking strategy with those players and you can go after other options that are very similar, that are just upside plays per ADP. Or these are top tier guys that are in a situation where they can go nuclear, and their situation either got better, their second year wide receiver ready to step up even more, and you're going to want to draft them, especially at price. But let me know who's your main target in your draft right now. Who's your favorite draft pick right now? Put that in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button. Stop missing out. Catch you on the next video.